Chris is going to talk to us about tours of duty. I just love that concept. I have no idea what it means in terms of employees, but you'll explain it all. So Chris is the VP of Marketing for PB Works in San Francisco, where he's connected to Silicon Valley. So he's going to bring in some fresh air from Silicon Valley for us. He's also a general partner at Wasabi Ventures, a global venture fund, startup incubator, and consulting firm, where he leads the firm's investment committee. I'd also like to thank Julie here, who helped put it together. She's with Harvard Business Review, Harvard Business Press Review, Harvard Business Review Press. And they are featuring this book, and they put me in touch with Chris, so that's wonderful. And Chris is the co-author of this book with Reid Hoffman, who's the CEO and chairman of LinkedIn, and Ben Kosnoka. And let's see, Chris holds 2 degrees from Stanford, and he has his MBA from Harvard Business School, where he was named a Baker Scholar. So let's give him a warm welcome. And,
all right. Good morning, Boston children. Thank you so much for making time out of your day to come here. I really appreciate it. We're really excited about the book, The Alliance. We just launched it last week, thanks to the good folks at Harvard Business Review Press. I think I got that right. And this is actually the very first talk one of us has given about the book. So you are our inaugural audience. So feedback is going to be very important. Participation is going to be very important. And hopefully this will help us develop and continue to grow the entire affair. So let me begin. The Alliance. What is this all about? What the Alliance is all about is trying to find a new way of working together. Ultimately, the way that we currently work together as employer and employee is broken. We have a situation where people are dishonest with each other. We have a situation where employers say you have a job for life, and employees say I want to stay here for life. Yet in many cases this isn't true. Now the response has been to say that we're all free agents. Probably heard this. I think Dan Pink came and spoke. So that's Dan's book originally, Free Agent Nation. But the problem with free agency is that when everyone is a free agent, there's no loyalty, there's no trust, there's no long-term investment. What we set out to do is to figure out what is the proper medium between the two. How can you find a way to build trust, build relationships where people can invest in each other, but have the flexibility to adapt to a changing world? The fact is, when we think about employment, we tend to think about employment contracts. We think about terms, salaries, job titles. But all these factors are ultimately not the thing that make the employment relationship work. What makes the employment relationship work is the one-on-one relationship between the individual employee and the individual manager. And this one-on-one relationship is never written down. It's never explicit. It's something where you guys come to work the first day, you meet your manager, and they probably say, you know what, welcome to Boston Children's. We're glad to have you on board, glad to have you as part of the family. Now go out and do something, I got a lot of work to do. How many people here are busy? Right? It's amazing to me that you managed to find time for this. And as a result, how much time does your manager spend with you? Talking about your future, talking about your career. It's tough. There's no time, and it's kind of an awkward conversation. So what we've tried to do in the Alliance is set out a framework for figuring out how to actually do this. Historically, companies thought of themselves as family. I have my family in the room today in the back, my wife and kids. You can see Jason raising his hand. And we love the idea of family. Who doesn't love family? But the idea of family doesn't necessarily apply to work. Because the last I checked, I can't fire Jason for looking at his Game Boy Advance during my talk. And in fact, as a result, when we say that our company is like family, and yet we act in ways that contradict that, we're caught in a lie. And we're fundamentally having a dishonest conversation. Back in the 1990s, Jack Welch was the CEO of General Electric, a very famous manager. And what he said is that all of our people are on one-day contracts. Perform today or you're out on your butt tomorrow. Now, I don't know about you, But I don't necessarily perform my best when I feel like every day I have to prove myself or I'm going to be fired. It always puzzles me that managers who themselves want to have these long-term contracts and golden parachutes and bonuses and the like, then turn around and say, but of course my employees work better when I put pressure on them every day. Very strange, very strange. How many years have you guys worked at your current company? Now, I talked with Alan before this, and what's interesting is that Boston Children's has an interesting mix of people. Folks who are here on the short term, especially on the clinical side, maybe doing a residency or rotation, but also folks who are here for the long term. So quick interactive exercise. Everyone who's been at the company for, actually we'll do it this way. Everyone who's been at the company for at least 5 years, stand up. All right. If you've been here at least 10 years, remain standing. Otherwise, sit down. 15 years. 20 years. 25 years. 30. Oh, congratulations! But what you see is there's a wide range of different possibilities for people to be here. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to support that entire range. When we brought out our article called Tours of Duty in Harvard Business Review last year, a lot of people said, wait a minute, tours of duty, so you're saying people should switch jobs all the time? And the answer is no, we're not saying people should switch jobs all the time. What we're saying is that people should be intentional about the time they're spending. So you've been at Boston Children's for over 30 years. It's been a great run, I imagine. Have you been in the same job that entire 30 years? You've changed jobs. You've changed responsibilities. You've changed roles. You've learned. You've grown. All at the same organization. But you've done it on separate tours of duty. And that's what we ultimately believe is the appropriate balance between lifetime employment and this free agent nation. The notion is an alliance. And that's a powerful metaphor. So think about what we mean by an alliance. An alliance is a relationship between two independent parties. Just because you're now an employee of Boston Children's doesn't mean that you've signed away your autonomy and that your life is now devoted solely to Boston Children's, as much as perhaps we might want that to be the case. Instead, you're still your own independent person. And an alliance recognizes that. It's a relationship between two independent parties who remain autonomous, but who have shared interests and goals. And the thing about an alliance is not just something that is a metaphor that you say, yeah, we're an alliance, we're allies, but then refer back to. If you get into a conflict, let's say it's World War II, and you're Britain and France, you're going to fight Germany, do you sort of say, okay, we're going to get together, actually, France is the wrong choice, US and France, we're going to fight Germany. And do you say, okay, great, we're going to fight Germany together. Now we're one country. No, that doesn't happen. On the other hand, you don't also say, okay, we're going to fight Germany together, so you try hard, and I'll try hard, and everything will work out. Doesn't make much sense either. An alliance spells out. You're attacking on this front, I'm attacking on this front. You're defending here, you're defending here. Our responsibility is to provide tanks, your responsibility is to provide planes. And so an alliance specifies the nature of the relationship, which means that you're setting clear expectations and being honest so that people aren't disappointed later on. Question. What do you guys think is the most innovative company in the world? Go ahead, shout out answers. Any company. Google. Google, for example. Great. Another company.
Amazon.
Amazon. Good example. Another company. One more. Anyone. Tesla. Great. Now, what's interesting about all these companies is that you just named 3 technology companies. Maybe it's because I'm a Silicon Valley guy, but a lot of times people think of Silicon Valley and high tech as the place where innovation happens. That's probably because my guess is all of you have a phone in your pocket that came from either Apple or Google. All of you went online today and probably used a product of Silicon Valley. Probably right after this, you're going to use a product of Silicon Valley. It's interspersed our entire lives. Right like that, for example. Is that an Android phone? Yeah, there we go. But what is it that makes Silicon Valley so innovative and special? Well, there's a lot of things that we hear about in the press when you read about Silicon Valley. Maybe Alan's even shared some articles on these practices, right? If you've ever been to Google, you've seen, they've got incredible food. They've got award-winning cafeterias. My co-author, Ben, told me he actually hadn't spent any money on food in the past year because he just got all his food from the LinkedIn cafeteria. Pretty amazing. He's a young guy. Eats a lot, which is a good thing. Maybe it's the crazy offices, right? Sleeping pods. I actually like sleeping myself. I take naps on a regular basis. I don't necessarily need a pod to do it, just a mattress. Slides. Crazy offices. Maybe Stanford University, where all these entrepreneurs have gone to school. And these are all very exciting, and they're all very flashy, and they're all very easy to write about. But ultimately, they're not what makes Silicon Valley innovative. What makes Silicon Valley innovative is the people. And the people in Silicon Valley are no smarter than the people in this room. In many cases, they may be less smart, considering this is Boston Children's. But what makes a difference is how those people are organized and how they're managed. So, take a look at all these different companies. We named 3 of them on the list today. Google, Amazon, Tesla, right? Amazing. Couldn't have queued that up even better. What makes these companies so innovative is their approach to people. So let me give you a great example from Pixar. So many of you are probably familiar with John Lasseter, who was the original director of Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Finding Nemo. He's now the chief creative officer of Disney and is probably responsible more so than anyone else for the success of Pixar and for taking enormous amounts of money out of your pocket to buy every single DVD for your kids. I know we have every single one, except for Cars 2, because that was awful. I don't blame John for that. But there's an interesting story about John that not a lot of people recognize. So John Lasseter grew up dreaming of working for Disney. All his life, he wanted to be an animator, and he wanted to work at the Walt Disney Corporation. He wanted it so badly that, in fact, he worked at Disneyland as a boy, as a teen, as one of those Jungle Cruise guys, with the hat and the gun and the various terrible jokes. And one day he got to realize his dream. He was hired by Disney as an animator. And he got to work, and he started working on various projects, and he was happy as ever. And one day he went to a local trade show and saw this new thing, computer-generated graphics. He was like, wow, that's amazing. This new technology could be huge for the world of animation. I think it could be a whole new art form. And he went back to the folks at Disney. He went to his manager and said, I got a great idea, guys. Let's do computer-generated animation. I just came back from this trade show. It's phenomenal. It'll be the future. It'll help rejuvenate our franchise. And he said, oh, interesting, very interesting, very interesting. And he went back to his desk and was really excited. And 10 minutes later, the phone rang, and he picked up the phone. He said, you're fired. Get out. You have until the end of the day. Oh, my God. Fired. Like that. His lifelong dream gone in an instant because he dared to bring up an idea. Like, why would we waste our time on this toy of a technology? Fortunately for John Lasseter, he ended up on his feet. He was hired into Pixar, which was at that point part of Lucasfilm, because they specifically wanted to do computer-generated movies and images. And over the course of the next few years, Pixar made short films and ultimately made Toy Story, which, of course, as we know, changed the world of animation and launched Pixar on probably the greatest run that any movie studio has ever had. Hit after hit after hit. And again, with the exception of Cars 2, good movies. And Disney realized their mistake because they were getting their lunch eaten. They'd forgotten, but before Frozen and Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph and Disney came back under John Lasseter's leadership, Disney animation was in a sad, sad state with movies like Home on the Range and Treasure Planet. Not do very well at all. And the thing about Disney is their core fundamental business is predicated on having new animated movies for kids. Their entire business is based on owning the concept of childhood and then being able to milk us parents like cows for all they're worth. And if you don't have new properties, you can't have new rides. You can't have new TV shows on the Disney Channel. You can't sell more toys. And your business is going to die. So Disney looked at the situation and said, all right, We're working with Pixar, and what we've got to do is we've got to control Pixar. And so they began talking with Steve Jobs, who of course was the CEO and owner of Pixar, about buying the company. And Steve Jobs named a figure that they thought was absurd. Multiple billions of dollars. And then Disney CEO Michael Eisner said, "Oh, tell you what, I've seen their new movie. It's some fish movie. It's going to flop. And after it flops, we'll have them right where we want them. We can buy them cheap." There's a reason why Michael Eisner is no longer the CEO of Disney. His relationship with Steve Jobs is one of those reasons. Disney ended up paying $7 billion to acquire Pixar. Pixar, which ultimately in many ways was the result of the work of one man whom Disney had as an employee and who wanted nothing more than to work for Disney the rest of his life. So what does this lesson tell us, besides the fact that Michael Eisner was a dope when it came to these things? What it tells us is that you can have the most phenomenally talented employees. You can have someone who is capable of changing the world. But if you don't build a relationship with that employee that lets them actually leverage their talents, flourish and flower and do the things that they're capable of doing, it's worthless. And so that's why we're focused today on the nature of that relationship. How do you recruit, manage, and retain the best people in the world? Much as you guys have done here. How do you help them flourish and change the world? The concept that Alan referred to at the beginning is the concept of tours of duty. And tours of duty is a military term. And we agonized over this because Silicon Valley is not the world's most conservative place. And the military is not the single most popular thing in Silicon Valley. But we kept coming back to this concept. The military really does sort of understand this. A tour of duty is a period of time where you're serving a specific mission. You're trying to accomplish an objective. And in the Army, you don't say, "Oh, I sign up for a tour of duty and I'm out." A lot of people in the Army for a long period of time. They may deploy to various parts of the world. They may advance over time in rank, but they stay with the same organizations. We thought, there's a very interesting concept there. How do we use that and take that and apply that to the business world? Ultimately, it's about those mutual goals. And it's not about having a, like I said, unity where all of your goals are exactly the same. Rather, it's having an appropriate level of overlap. So when it comes to mutual goals, it's a question, what does the company want to do? What does the employee want to do? And can we bring those two together? Explicitly acknowledging that the different parties may have things that they disagree on is okay. In fact, you have more resilience in a relationship if you're willing to admit that it's not a 100% overlap. And that honesty is what builds the trust. Right? Ultimately, if you're able to be honest and open with employees, if you're able to talk about these things in a way that's structured, in a way that acknowledges the realities, but at the same time lets you set out the goals, that's how you build trust. And one of the ways we believe that trust gets built is over time. So it's not that in your first day you're going to commit to an organization for the rest of your life. That would be kind of crazy. That would be like, I think there's a new television show, Married at First Sight. Right? That's great for reality TV. I don't think that's necessarily so good for those marriages. Instead, the trust should be built over time. Somebody once told me that trust is a question of consistency over time. There's no way to build trust overnight. You have to build it up over time. And tours of duty allow you to do that. Now, in fact, there are 3 different kinds of tours of duty. The first kind of tour of duty that we talk about in the book is what we call the rotational tour of duty. And this is the one that people are most familiar with. So, for example, the residents at the hospital on a rotational tour of duty. It's a structured program. Oftentimes, people are all entering at the same time. And the main benefit of this rotational tour of duty is it's got these very explicit expectations, and it's very scalable. You can bring in a whole new crew of residents every August. Or is it July or August? Every July. I can't remember whether it's never get sick in July or never get sick in August. Probably best to avoid both. But you can bring in a whole new crew of residents every July and bring them into the Boston Children's Fold. And they'll learn, and they'll grow, and they'll figure out how to do things. The first day, they're looking around, they don't know anything. But then gradually over time, over the course of their residency, they'll become accomplished clinicians, hopefully. And they'll know what's going on in the organization. It's at that point that it may be appropriate to move into what we call a transformational tour of duty. Now, transformational tour of duty is probably the main thing you guys are going to write down notes about today. And the idea behind a transformational tour of duty is to take an explicit deal between a manager and employee and really lay out what the expectations are. We call it transformational because the idea is that by undertaking this particular mission, the employee gets to transform their own career as well as their organization. In Silicon Valley, a great example of a transformational tour of duty is, hey, I'm tapping you as a product manager to launch this new product into the marketplace. There's a very clear objective, launch the project into the marketplace. But there's also very clear benefits to both sides. The product manager, who I just talked about, is going to get the experience of launching a new product, kind of like being a mini CEO. If they launch the product and it does well, they'll have made their reputation in the industry. It'll allow them to go on perhaps to become a VP of product management, perhaps to then become a CEO of a company, or perhaps at the same company. Meanwhile, the company itself has gotten this very talented person, this John Lasseter of a person, to devote all their energies into launching a new product that may represent millions, hundreds of millions, or even in some cases, some companies, billions of dollars worth of revenue. That's a transformation for both sides. And it's not something that necessarily says these two people are the same. These two people have none of their own goals or objectives. What it says is we have an alliance where these things overlap. And we believe that when you have these transformational tours of duty between a manager and an employee, then everyone has a sense of purpose. The individual employees know, I have this as my mission. And by accomplishing my mission, I will receive this benefit. And then on the other side of it, the manager knows, this is the mission my employee is going to accomplish. This is how I'm going to judge them and be able to give them guidance along the way. And at the end of this, when the mission is accomplished, this is what I know will have happened to my business. Now, the transformational tour of duty, like most of these tours of duty, is not necessarily a contract that says, this tour of duty shall last 2 years, 3 months. You have an employment contract, and we're not asking you to change that. If there are any people from the legal department in the room, let me reassure you, I'm not asking you to change the legal contracts. That would be a big pain. What is instead is a moral and ethical commitment, right, between a manager and an employee, saying, this is what we choose to do together. And even though it's not written down on a piece of paper, it hasn't been negotiated by a union, compliance hasn't blessed it, this is how we intend to act toward each other. And we believe that even without a contract behind it, people want to do the right thing. People want to grow. People want to accomplish missions that are worthy of them. So being able to do this is something that each individual manager can do, even if the entire organization doesn't adopt it wholesale. Even if you don't have the legal department give you a set of new contracts, you can start making a difference by working with your individual people and saying, let's figure out what your mission is. Let's figure out what you're getting out of this mission. Let's figure out what we're getting out of this mission. The other benefit of being explicit about a tour of duty is you know when it's going to end. If the idea is you're going to launch this product, you know what the launch date is. And before that date arrives, you can say, all right, you're still working on finishing out your mission, but let's talk about what your next mission is going to be. I think far too often in our busy schedules as managers, we don't have time to sit down and talk with our employees about what they're going to do next or where their career is going. Having explicit structure where as you approach the end of a tour of duty, you start talking about the new tour of duty helps you to actually make a person's career directed, structured, as opposed to them feeling like, I'm just kind of here and I see my manager every now and then. One of the things that we put out as an additional article on Harvard Business Review is what we call the right of first conversation. And the idea here is that if the manager and employee have this kind of trusted alliance, if that employee thinks, I think my future may lie elsewhere, there should be a notion that they have the first conversation with their manager. Now the reason this is important is you probably, all of you have managed, you've probably lost good people before. We all have done it. By the time they come to you, they've got a job offer at hand. Maybe they've even accepted it. It's too late to change things. Why does this happen? Because there isn't enough trust. Not in you as a manager, because you're probably a good manager. I'm assuming if you're in this room, you're a good manager. But in the institutional practices themselves, where somebody says, I'm thinking about other options, then all of a sudden that's career limiting for them. But when you can build that trust in the relationships, then they'll come to you for that first conversation. Then you have the chance to actually figure out, okay, maybe you need to be on a different mission. Or maybe we can do something to retain you. Ultimately, the idea behind this kind of structure is to increase retention rather than reduce it. The final kind of tour of duty is the kind of tour of duty you find yourself on after you've been someplace for 30 years, which is what we call a foundational tour of duty. I'm sure you guys can think about your colleagues and think about people who are really foundational to how Boston Children's work, people who really embody the values and principles of the company, people who you know you can go to if you want to find out, hey, how do we do things around here? Is this the Boston Children's way? And having those kinds of people is still very important. In fact, every company is going to have a mix of people on different kinds of tours of duty. It doesn't make sense for somebody who's been here for 30 years and is foundational to the company and the brand new resident to have exactly the same relationship with their manager. Each of these brings something different. Rotational tours of duty allow you to have scalability. You can bring in a lot more people. When you're hiring people who are coming up, millennials perhaps, it's very important to be able to provide them with an explicit deal, but be able to provide that in a way that's time efficient. And that's where that rotational tour of duty comes in. The transformational tours of duty allow you to help your organization adapt. The specific missions that you put people on, that other people agree to, that help transform the company itself. And that adaptability is key as technology changes, as market changes, as the economics change, regulation, everything else. And finally, foundational people are still very important because ultimately, Boston Children's is not just a business. It's not just a hospital. It's a living, breathing organization. And the foundational tour of duty people, the folks who have been here and are the keepers of the Boston Children's Way, are essential to maintaining that continuity in that relationship. So scalability, adaptability, and continuity. Every company needs all three of these. They may need them in different proportions. In Silicon Valley, we need a hell of a lot of adaptability. One of my friends always gives the example of, if you think back to the year 2007, the #1 telephone maker in the world was Nokia. Some of you may actually remember this. You remember the ringtone. Right? You hear that all the time. When was the last time you heard that? In 2007, Nokia knew exactly how to dominate the mobile phone business. The key is to make a whole bunch of different phones that look different, have different form factors. Make sure that they come in all sorts of cool colors. And make sure that you have some nice celebrities who are using them, right? And the ringtones. Absolutely, ringtones. That's the key. It's a billion-dollar business. What happened to Nokia? If you look at the phones in your pockets, they all look exactly the same. They're almost all exactly the same color. And I'm not sure the last time you actually downloaded a ringtone. I mean, can you actually still even do that? That was 2007. That wasn't like 20 years ago. That was 7 years ago. And by the way, that revolution happened in like 2 or 3 years. That's the kind of change that requires you to have adaptability, to be able to take your people and put them on these transformational tours and set them on a mission to change the direction of the company. So what is it that you do as a manager? As a manager, you go to your employee and say, I'm going to help you transform your career. If you come to work for me and you accomplish a mission for me, and I hope you'll stick around after that, you're going to transform the trajectory of your career. One of the folks at LinkedIn is Mike Gamson. He's an executive there. And one of the things he tells people when he brings in an employee is, what's the job you're going to take after you leave LinkedIn? That's a little extreme. But by doing that, he emphasizes, I'm here to change the trajectory of your career. I'm here to build a relationship that will allow you to accomplish great things. As an employee, because all of us who are managers, aside from the CEO, also have managers ourselves. We're also employees. The question, the commitment you make is, I'm going to help transform the company. I'm going to be able to apply my energies, my intelligence, my skills to making something happen for this company. And it's a lot easier to do that if you actually know what that mission is, which many of us don't. We'll accommodate your career goals and personal values ultimately, there has to be a fit. We talk about the concept of alignment. You guys are here at Boston Children's because you fundamentally believe that it is critical, essential, important that we treat sick children. That what's the mantra? Until all children. And that's something you guys believe. That's the kind of alignment that most companies would die to have. You guys have it, which is great. But there's also the question of people's individual career goals. Most people are not going to stay in exactly the same job for 35, 40 years, right? They're going to continue to change jobs. They're going to continue to change their responsibilities and goals. And so a company needs to say, you know what? We're not hiring you as a tool that we're going to fit into this slot. We're going to keep you in that slot forever. We understand that part of the bargain is we're going to continue to help you advance and change. And I, as an employee, am going to embrace the company purpose and uphold its values. If you can't say that I agree with the values of the company I work for, you're probably working for the wrong company. Now, mind you, we all need to make a living. And I'm sure there have been, not in this organization, but other companies, people have had to work for employers who they didn't embrace their values. But were they giving their greatest effort then? Or were they thinking, I'm taking this job until I can get a better one? Values are important. So coming back to the question I asked you at the beginning, what is the most innovative company in the world? Well, all these companies, LinkedIn, Tesla, YouTube, Square, 500 stars. What do all these companies have in common, these innovative companies? See if anyone can guess. There's an interesting fact that goes next to them all. Any guess whatsoever? Great learning and development. Good question. Good kissing ass. I like that. What's interesting is that all of these companies were founded by former PayPal employees. PayPal, as an organization, you probably used it if you ever bought anything off of eBay. It was started back in the dot-com boom by Peter Thiel and Max Levchin. And ultimately, its alumni spawned all these companies. It's been referred to as the PayPal Mafia. And the interesting thing, this is John Lasseter writ large. After eBay bought PayPal, they essentially forced out all of the original employees. And all these original employees, all of a sudden, with a bunch of money and with the desire to continue to prove themselves, went out and founded all of these companies, some of which, in the case of LinkedIn, are worth something like $20 billion. YouTube obviously sold to Google for $1.6 billion. Everyone now agrees Google got a huge bargain. SpaceX and Tesla, huge, huge companies. And all these companies, all of them were employees of PayPal, could all still theoretically be employees of eBay today if they wanted to do that. The alumni relationship is key. eBay has gotten nothing out of all these amazing companies that have come out. Does anyone ever sit here and think, if it weren't for eBay, we wouldn't have Tesla? You probably didn't even realize that until today. So that's a huge resource that's going to waste. Alumni are the employees who have actually left the organization. And the interesting thing is that if you've been a good organization, if you've been an organization which people are proud to be a part of, they want to remain part of it after they leave. 98% of Fortune 500 companies have corporate alumni groups on LinkedIn. What proportion of those corporate alumni groups do you think are actually administered by the company? Take a guess. Any guess?
0.
It is close. It is 2%. 2%. The other 98% are run by alumni who've just done this on their own time. Isn't that astonishing? This is the Fortune 500. These are not new startups that have 0 alumni. They have thousands of former employees. The alumni relationship is so critical because alumni can help your organization in so many different ways. And again, you're bringing in clinicians, you're training them, maybe they're going on to positions at other hospitals around the world. Think of all the different ways they can help. They can refer patients to Boston Children's. They can carry the word of what you guys have done out at various conferences, various events, various other things. When somebody says, hey, what's the best children's hospital in the world? My child needs help. Those people are going to say Boston Children's. Huge value. If you complete a tour of duty, you'll be welcome to our corporate alumni group. Now, one of the things that's important to note is we're not saying that everyone should be welcome to the corporate alumni organization. Let's say somebody leaves, bad terms, they did something bad, maybe they even sue the organization. It's appropriate to say you're not welcome. But for most people, if they actually accomplished their mission, if they upheld their end of the bargain, the fact that they left should not be held against them. It may be that their path simply took them elsewhere. And especially if you've used the tour of duty framework, you've had that conversation with them first. You've discussed whether or not their goals can be achieved at your organization. And if they leave, then it's best done as an amicable parting where there's been plenty of time to bring a successor and where there's now can be a long-term relationship with that person as an alum. Alan mentioned one of the other things, which is that a lot of boomerangs. Are there any people in the room who worked for Boston Children's, left, and then came back? Feel free to raise your hand. And I assume these are valued employees. Don't tell me different if they're not. This is an amazing resource. These are people who already know the Boston Children's way, who already know how things work, and who can come back bringing new experiences and new knowledge, a breath of fresh air, as we mentioned at the beginning. And this may especially be important if you're talking about the new and youngest employees you're bringing in, the millennials who maybe have wanderlust, who feel like they want to try different things, maybe live in New York, God knows why. Right? But if you maintain a good relationship with them, then when they're tired of trying to get their kids into schools in New York and so on and so forth, and they want to come back, they'll think to themselves, God, let me go talk to my old manager at Boston Children's, or let me reach out to other folks in the alumni group. I'll participate in the alumni group to help the company in my career. And the interesting thing is, alumni are more than happy to help the company, as long as the company maintains a good relationship with them. Do you think that somebody wants to work for a company that wants to be an alumnus of a company that's successful, or an alumnus of a company that's unsuccessful? Which one do you think is better for your career, right? You want your whole companies to succeed, just like you want your school to succeed. I still donate money to Stanford every year, even though God knows they don't need it. It's because those stupid U.S. News and World Report rankings. Look at the percentage of alumni who contribute. I even went to my HBS section mates. HBS, you're in a section of 80 people. And I said, for God's sake, there's no excuse for you not to at least contribute $5. Come on, you're HBS graduates, you have plenty of money. And even if you don't want to contribute, just contribute $5. I will send you $5 just to boost that up. Now, that's my alumni commitment to my organizations. And again, it's because I understand that their success is my success, and similarly, my success is their success. So, making change. How do you make change in your organization using these ideas? Well, first of all, buy the book on Amazon and write a review, because that's very helpful. Amazon, so I have my HBRP team. I think they told me that Amazon now represents something like 70% of business book sales overall. So, wow, those Amazon reviews are really helpful. But beyond that, there are many different things that you can do. So, not entirely joking about the book, but in terms of making change, the most important thing is to start changing your mindset, to say, listen, I'm going to treat my employees as allies, I'm going to treat them as independent people with whom I have mutual interests, and I'm going to start being honest and transparent about what we're both getting out of the relationship. How do you do that? Well, the book has various strategies talking about all the different elements I've touched on today. Alignment, the right of first conversation, the alumni network, and how do you retain, what's the only way you keep, by the way, that's terrible. I didn't necessarily write that one. What's the only way you can retain an entrepreneurial employee? That's like one of those newscasts where they say, this country's leadership was just overthrown. News at 11 with Ventura Tank. So I'll tell you the only way you can retain an entrepreneurial employee. The only way you can retain an entrepreneurial employee is to give them the opportunity to be entrepreneurial. There, that was worth the price of admission, right? No, what I mean is, if you have an employee who's entrepreneurial, what that means is they want to make change. They want to take the world as it is and move it somewhere else. Now, this can be difficult in some organizations, and sometimes these folks are labeled as troublemakers, or they're the people who, gosh, is a pain in the ass. But the answer is not to say, let's get rid of it. The answer is, where do we need a pain in the ass? Where do we need someone who's not satisfied? Where do we need someone who's going to keep pushing? And to take that entrepreneurial energy and channel it for the good of the company, for the good of the organization, rather than just letting them go off and, like eBay, start multiple multi-billion-dollar companies that you get absolutely zero credit. Anyways, all these topics and more are covered in depth in the book. But because we actually still have time, you have an even better opportunity, which is to just ask me all the questions you like. So with that, I'll return back to the beginning, which is to say, imagine a world in which we have these open and honest conversations about our careers and about our objectives. Imagine we have a world in which company and employee can invest in each other, can trust in each other, benefit from each other, even after the employee relationship is over. That's the kind of world that hopefully all of you as managers are going to work towards, and the kind of world that will actually make our organization and ourselves much stronger. So with that, I will open it up to questions and answers and any troublemakers who might be present. I love Q&A because it means I don't actually have to remember it. So anyone who wants to ask a question, please, by all means, back there.
So these alumni groups, are you suggesting that they are created by the organization, sponsored by the organization, or independent of the organization?
Excellent question. So, we believe that organizations should actually sponsor the alumni groups. And there are different levels of sponsorship that you can undertake. The first level of sponsorship is just to go ahead and actually have an alumni liaison who's working with the various volunteers. And you can even pay for a few things. People are remarkably grateful if you just pay for pizza or provide them with coffee or other things like that. You can also go further than that, which is to work more closely with them. So a great example is a company here in the Boston area is HubSpot. They're a marketing software provider, very successful, will probably IPO this year. And what they do is they have an alumni group. They haven't been around that long, but they have an alumni group that was set up by some of the former employees. And they pay for the food and drink at the alumni group. And at every alumni group, they send every alumni group meeting, right now it's just one group here in the Boston area, they send a senior executive who then takes a question and answer session with the former employees. And the former employees want to know, hey, wait a minute, I had this stock. When's the company going to go public? How's the business doing? What can I do to help? And their commitment is they have a senior executive go to each of them. It's not always one of the founders. It might be a different member of the team. But that's the kind of level of commitment that doesn't cost a lot of money, but I think puts you miles ahead of the typical corporation, as we saw. You can go further than that. If you think about some of the organizations that have done this the most, the management consultancies come to mind. They're almost like colleges and universities. And when we talked with BCG for the book, they said, oh yeah, we have 6 full-time people. All they do is help our alumni find jobs. 6 full-time people doing that. And that is the highest level of investment. Now, it makes sense for them because guess what? They help their alumni go find a job as CEO of this company. Who's that CEO going to hire when they want a management consultant to come in? That's millions of dollars of business right there. So the level of investment is going to depend on the nature of your business. If you're like a management consultancy and each alum who goes to a company can be worth millions or tens of millions of dollars of business, it's okay to have 6 full-time people helping them find jobs. But even if your organization doesn't have that kind of economics, paying for some pizza and sending someone to go talk with them, that's more than worthwhile. Excellent question. Next question.
The CEO of HubSpot is coming in December 3rd.
Awesome. Dharmesh is a great guy. As it turns out, he's in the book, and we talk about some of the programs in the book. So for example, just a great example that I didn't really touch on in the talk. One of the things we talk about is the importance of helping employees build their networks and then being able to leverage those networks. So HubSpot has a program they call Learning Meals. And the idea behind Learning Meals is that employees, any employee, can expense any meal they have if they believe that they'll be able to learn something out of it, provided they come back to the organization and talk about what they learned. That doesn't cost a lot of money, and I'm sure if somebody actually abused it, oh, another 10,000 bottles of sake, even the manager would talk to them. But it's a great way of A, demonstrating the trust you have in your employees, and B, helping them really reach out and begin bringing new ideas into the organization. And yeah, Dharmesh is a great guy, and you'll love him. He's a great speaker as well. Next question. Over here.
I'm interested in the concept of the right to first conversation.
Yes.
And in particular, how a manager can build trust with employees that it's actually okay to do that, and as you kind of alluded to, that it won't threaten their career next year if they decide to stay. You know, the fact that they're considering leaving, you know, incredible, forget you then. Like, how do you feel about that?
Exactly. So this is one of the most difficult things, and there's a reason why we aim the book so squarely at managers. And the reason is there is this power imbalance. Again, sometimes it can get in the other direction. In Silicon Valley, the joke is that an engineer can get 6 job offers before lunchtime from various headhunters because people who know how to program iOS and so on and so forth are sort of in demand. But typically, the manager has the power. They sign the checks. They can fire you. It's kind of the definition of power. And so it's up to the manager to build that trust. And what we tell people is you can't build that trust overnight because trust is consistency over time. The first time you tell them, hey, I'm open to this conversation, they'll say, yes, ma'am, you're open to the conversation. Absolutely. And the second time you say it, they'll, oh, yes, But if you maintain that consistency over time, they'll start to warm up. The other thing that you can do is you can actually model the behavior yourself, which again, people feel a little uncomfortable. But if you talk about your own thought process about, when I thought about coming here, here's what I've looked at. In the past, when I thought about going elsewhere, here's how I thought about it. Here's why I ultimately made the decision to stay. But, you know, this person who I know ultimately made the decision to leave, and this is why he or she did that. It's kind of a forbidden topic, right? Nobody wants to bring it up. And there's a good reason why people don't want to bring it up. Because the notion of a company and a family is a very delicate illusion. And every time somebody leaves, you have to, like, go through the whole process of blanking out their existence, pretending that it didn't happen. But I often tell entrepreneurs, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, I often tell them, listen, the first time you ever let someone go or the first time that someone leaves, that's the toughest time. Because all of a sudden, you were your family, your buddies, you spend all your time together. No one could ever possibly leave, right? And, oh crap, someone left. Does this mean it's all fake? That none of it meant anything? And the answer is no, of course not. Right? You have a relationship. Sometimes people need to move on. And that's why it's difficult, but I think that those are some of the different ways that you can do that. Next question, over there.
How do you feel the tour duty framework to the different, like a widget here?
Excellent question. So this is one of the things that we actually talked about in the book as well, which is a lot of people saying, wow, this tour of duty stuff sounds great. That's kind of what we do for the stars of our organization. Every manager is like, oh yeah, this person's a star. And of course, give them special treatment and give them good assignments and all sorts of stuff like that. But how do we scale it up to what we refer to in the book as the corporate middle class? The people who are there, who are working for the company, the widget makers or what have you. And the answer is, you know, star treatment isn't just for stars. If you consider star treatment treating people fairly and honestly with the opportunity to learn and grow. So even if you're a widget maker, perhaps there's a new machine that you need to learn how to use. Perhaps there's a new manufacturing technique. Perhaps there's a new management technique. Maybe you're taking some leadership and development courses on emotional intelligence. There's all sorts of different ways that you can actually have your work help you increase your skills and progress your career. Somebody may enter a factory as a line worker, and they may want to then learn how to become a specialist in the Toyota production system. Or they may want to learn how to use the computer-aided design and machining, or the like. There's always things going on in any organization. I mean, again, admittedly, there will be exceptions. If your organization digs ditches, I have a harder time coming up with that. Maybe you become a ditch-digging operations process specialist. I don't know. But anyways, so the point is, as the key is for the manager to then be able to look at it. Now it's harder because in a widget maker in a manufacturing operation, as a manager, you may not have, like in a white-collar organization, knowledge workers, you might have 3 or 4 people reporting to you, maybe 10. If you're a foreman, you might have 100 people reporting to you. And so you take the principles of the rotational tour of duty and you say, okay, it's going to be hard for me to personalize and have one-on-one meetings with all 100 of them. But here are some different things. Here are some different rotations that I think would be interesting. Here's the computer-aided design rotation. Here's the Kanban system rotation, et cetera, et cetera. And you can divide people up into groups and work with them collectively. So those are just some of the different potential options there. Other questions? Back there.
Do you have any thoughts on what if this tour, what if it doesn't go very well? So it's less than,
Yes.
maybe it doesn't fail spectacularly, but it's less than desirable.
Absolutely. So it's bound to happen from time to time. It might be that the tour of duty, especially in Silicon Valley, failure is very common. You hear about the successes, but the estimate is that of every 1,000 companies that somebody says, I'm going to start, maybe 1 out of those 1,000 ends up being successful. And even venture capitalists who have given a company millions of dollars, maybe 10% of the companies they fund are successful. So failure is probably the default state in Silicon Valley as opposed to the exception. So the answer is, if the tour of duty doesn't go well, examine the reason why the tour of duty didn't go well. Was it the case that the person accomplished the mission, but the mission was the wrong mission? Or was it the case that the person was unable to accomplish the mission because they didn't have the resources? Or was it that person actually isn't very good? Which is also a possibility. If it's that person is not very good, you have to evaluate, do you really want them on the team? It's cold-blooded to say it, but just because you hired someone doesn't mean you're going to keep them forever. If they're not a good fit, you're holding on to them is not doing them any favors. They need to go someplace where they're going to be valued, not sort of the person that you keep around because you want to be a good guy. And if it's the case that they weren't able to accomplish the mission because they didn't have the right resources, then you say, okay, do we need to give you the right resources and recommit to the same mission? Or do we want to look at a different mission instead? And so the key is look at the mission, look at the reasons why it wasn't accomplished, and then you may decide this person's no good, this person needs better resources, this person needs a different mission. Next. Over there.
Are there any pros and cons to rotating people through within an organization versus having people come and go regularly?
Absolutely. So the biggest pro with having people rotate in an organization is that organizational continuity. And General Electric is the classic example of this, right? Somebody like Jeff Immelt, who becomes CEO of General Electric, becomes CEO after working in 7 different divisions, doing 7 completely different things. And the idea is, for them, they want people to have a broad exposure to all of General Electric's businesses. That's really powerful and useful. But what it also means is that person only understands how things are done at General Electric. And the benefit of having people go out and come back is they've experienced a different organization. Doesn't mean the other organization is better, but they have a different perspective. They understand that there's not only one way of doing things, and perhaps that makes them better change agents or better able to say, hey, maybe we should look at alternatives. Because ultimately, one of the expressions we use in the book is that no organization, no matter how smart, not Boston Children's, not Google, has more smart people in the organization than in the rest of the world. Just not possible. There are all these great ideas that are out there, and you have to find ways to bring them in. Sometimes it's with employees who are coming back after having left. Some of the times it's through things like these learning deals or otherwise tapping into the employees' networks. But that would be a way I think about it. And yes, next question. I think you're about to ask one. I know he's the intern. No? I'm sorry. Next question, over there.
We have loads of managers who are faculty and researchers, and they run or walk on their own pace, correct? So in that case, have you done this kind of representation in front of the faculty members or faculty, and if so, how they take them in? And what are the things you think we should do different for those kind of
Yes. So I haven't specifically done the presentation in front of faculty, but I have done the presentation in front of the employees, the government employees of San Mateo County, which is a very different audience as well, as you can imagine. And these are government employees who typically have lifetime, no-fire contracts, pensions, and everything. At first I was puzzled. I wonder why these guys have brought me in here. And they said, well, what we have is we actually have this interesting divide because we can't afford to do this anymore. And so we have some of our employees who are on the old kind of contract, and some of our employees are here on different, more temporary contracts. And we're having tension in the organization trying to figure out how to hold everything together. And it's not exactly the same thing, but it's a similar analog, right? You've got the faculty members, they have tenure, right? They're working on their own pace. And you've got everyone else who's more of a conventional employee. So we're not going to make the difference go away. There's no way to do that. But what you can do is to say, okay, so my guess is I'm not going to get you to give up tenure. Right? When's the last time you heard a professor giving up their tenure? Not really likely. But what I can do is I can say, okay, well, what are the advantages that are inherent in a more flexible employment organization? How do I take advantage of those and give those additional options to the people who are not on these tenured contracts don't feel like they're second-class citizens? How can I take advantage of the differences rather than trying to hide them or pretend they don't exist? As for how you deal with people who have actual lifetime employment contracts, that's really hard. I think the best thing to do is to say, listen, I don't have the tool of being able to fire you to make you change. What I can do is I can say, admittedly, you voluntarily have to agree to this, but what is a mission that you would like to take on? What is a mission that if you take it on, you're going to be happy pursuing it, and it's also going to help the organization? And that you can still do. Admittedly, having dealt with some of these folks, they're so curmudgeonly, you can't even get anything out of them. You just do the best you can. Next question.
From your research, how important is compensation?
So, compensation is absolutely essential, but it's not the sole thing that motivates people, right? Ultimately, the reason compensation is so important is because people want to feel like they're treated fairly. Like, most of the problems around compensation are not, I mean, everyone wants more. I want more. I'm sure. Anyone here not want more money? No? Good. So everyone always wants more compensation. But what really burns is when you perceive it as unfair. Hey, why is that guy making that money when he's not really worthwhile? Or why is that person making so little money when he or she is so important to the organization? It's that kind of unfairness that sort of pulls at the thread of the actual organization and distorts things. So from our perspective, the most important thing is to try to make compensation as fair as possible. Within the tour of duty structure, one of the things you also have to do is you have to make sure you're not penalizing people for doing the right thing. Right? In some cases, you have a very convoluted compensation structure that says, okay, if you're going to stop managing 10 people and now manage 5 people, you're going to get paid less. Well, if making the shift to a really important mission requires them to take less money, that's not going to work. You can't, as a company, say, I want you to sacrifice money in order to do something that's going to help me, unless it's going to help them instead. So I think that the main thing is the compensation is an absolutely essential concern. Fairness is absolutely critical, but within the concept of the tour of duty, the key is to make sure that compensation lines up with the overall concept of taking on a mission. If you penalize them for doing the right thing, that's a bad thing. Next question. And if not, we can actually, I'll leave it to Alan.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, really? Well, I think that if we're going to give away this copy, we should give it to the person who is so foundational. Boston Children.
And also have to read a book club and buy $20.
Absolutely. And write a review, 5 stars, please.
And you'll be around for any questions?
Yeah, I'll be around for any questions. I think we were scheduled to go until 11:30, so we're letting you out early. So I'll hang around for a bit, and looking forward to meeting you.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
One second.